The EC was still immersed in thick, ash-gray fog. The sea surface was so calm it reflected every slowly drifting cloud like a giant mirror. First sunlight of the day just flickered on the eastern horizon, casting weak, pale pink streaks on the dark water surface. Light wind carrying year-end chill. Not a single large ripple. Only the sound of water lapping regularly against the sides of Vietnamese patrol boats quietly cutting waves near the Spratly archipelago. Suddenly, the dead silent air was broken by an abnormal sonar signal. A Vietnamese patrol vessel operating at a depth of 50 meters suddenly detected a giant artificial structure on the seabed, over 1,000 meters long, hundreds of meters wide, with dozens of sealed compartments and underground tunnels leading in many directions. Sonar image appeared on screen like a steel city, lying dormant under sand and coral layers. At the command station on the ship, the sonar duty crew immediately raised red alert. Screens flashed continuously. Radios rang shrilly. Urgent report was sent straight to the Vietnam Naval Command. An artificial underground base of unprecedented scale, only 80 nautical miles from Spratly, clearly secretly built over many months. In the underground war room at Cam Ranh, red lights flashed continuously. Electronic maps showed the sea area glowing bright with alarm points. Chiefs of staff exchanged briefly, voix slow but decisive. The first order was issued immediately. All nearest patrol forces close in on the area, simultaneously prepare the largest sortie formation ever. On the sea surface, the sun just rose above the horizon. Then the fog layer began to fade gradually. Wind grew stronger, carrying salty smell and strange metal smell from the seabed. The originally blue sky was now obscured by black clouds rolling in from the north. The situation was worsening by the second. Night fell on the East Sea. Darkness covered densely. Only white searchlights remained from Vietnamese patrol boats, sweeping slowly on the pitch-black water surface. Suddenly, Spratly coastal radar screamed loudly. Over 120 enemy warship signals appeared simultaneously on the screen, rushing from the north at a speed of over 25 knots per hour, forming a giant encirclement around the recently discovered underground base area. In the Cam Ranh war room, red lights flashed continuously. The electronic map glowed bright with hundreds of fast-moving red points. Red order was issued immediately. All frigates and missile ships from Cam Ranh and Phu Quoc, sortie urgently, accelerate to maximum, rushing straight into the fire zone. On the sea surface, the first Vietnamese patrol boat was closed in on by an enemy frigate. Only less than 500 meters left. Warning loudspeakers rang out continuously, not a single word in response. Only the sound of heavy metal collision when two ship bows crashed in the dark. Warning shot exploded right in front of the enemy ship's bow. Water column rose over 30 meters high. Sea surface glowed bright with firelight in the middle of the night. Immediate response. Main cannons from over 10 enemy frigates fired simultaneously. Hundreds of large caliber shells drew bright red parabolic lines on the black sky background, falling like rain of fire around the Vietnamese patrol boat formation. Continuous explosions made the sea surface boil. The first patrol boat was hit by 5 shells. Fire flared up violently from the engine room, the hull tilted completely, water rushed in like a waterfall. At the same time, from Cam Ranh, over 30 Vietnamese missile ships cutting white waves, rushing out to sea at a speed of over 40 knots per hour. Engines roared, drowning out wave sounds. Main cannons rotated continuously, radar scanned ceaselessly. They cut across the eastern enemy formation, then simultaneously fired over 100 first anti-ship missiles. Fire trails flew close to the water surface, charging straight into the dense enemy frigate cluster. The first one hit the lead enemy frigate. The hull was ripped apart, fire spread fast from the command room down to the ammo depot. Secondary explosion turned the ship into a fireball, over 100 meters high in the dark night. Over 20 other enemy ships were hit in succession. Fire flared up violently, billowing black smoke. Some tilted completely and flooded rapidly. Meanwhile, from the southwest, Vietnamese frigates from Phu Quoc also closed in on the siege. They cut across the enemy landing ship's bow, main cannons fired continuously. Second collision occurred. Two ships crashed in the dark, metal screeched horrifyingly. Then the second missile volley flew out from Vietnamese missile ships, turning 10 more enemy ships into giant torches in the East Sea at midnight. The sea surface glowed bright with firelight. Thick black smoke covered the entire sky area. Late night. East Sea shone bright as day, under thousands of overlapping flying missile fire trails. Over 200 anti-ship missiles from the enemy formation left launch tubes at the same time, flying close to water surface at terrifying speed, aiming straight at the Vietnamese missile ship cluster just closing the eastern siege. The Vietnamese air defense net reacted instantly. Over 150 interceptor missiles launched from frigates and missile ships, creating a dense wall of fire thousands of meters high in the black night. Boost explosion sounds echoed continuously. Over 80% of enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into fireballs falling into the sea like bright red meteor rain. The remaining ones rushed in. 10 hit the forward Vietnamese missile ship cluster. Fire flared up violently in the engine room. 3 ships tilted heavily. Water rushed into compartments like a black waterfall. 7 others were intercepted close aboard by Vietnamese frigates. Water columns rose over 100 meters high. Only 5 slipped through the net, striking 2 small patrol boats. Hulls exploded from the middle, broke in 2, sank completely in less than a minute, amidst horrifying metal screeching sound. Counterattack exploded immediately. The remaining Vietnamese missile ships simultaneously fired over 300 anti-ship missiles in the biggest wave of the night. They flew at 3 altitude layers, dividing into 6 spearheads, charging straight into the dense enemy formation of over 120 ships. The first hit the lead enemy frigate. The hull was completely ripped apart. Fire spread from the command room down to the main magazine. Secondary explosion turned the ship into a fireball over 200 meters high in the night. At the same time, from the mainland, over 30 Vietnamese fighter jets rushed out from southern bases. They flew low, close to the sea surface, dropping guided bombs and precision rockets onto the enemy landing ship cluster, trying to protect the underground base. Each bomb exploded, creating a white water column with thick black smoke. Over 20 landing ships were hit in succession. 1 mace, 15 broke in, 2 sinking immediately. The remaining 5 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall. Meanwhile, Vietnamese anti-submarine helicopters from Spratly took off in a large swarm. They dropped light torpedoes into water areas suspected of having enemy submarines protecting the underground base. Dull explosion sounds under the seabed rang out continuously. 3 submarines surfaced in a broken-in-half state, then sank forever with a giant column of black oil. Within less than 15 minutes, over 40 enemy ships were burning or sunken, oil slick forming black streaks tens of nautical miles long in the late-night East Sea. In the middle of the late-night East Sea, the sea surface glowed bright under thousands of missile fire trails, crisscrossing like a ghostly net. Over 300 anti-ship missiles from over 80 enemy ships left launch tubes in a single wave, flying close to the water surface at terrifying speed, aiming straight at the Vietnamese missile ship formation, tightening the siege south of the underground base area. The Vietnamese air defense net went up immediately. Over 200 interceptor missiles launched from frigates and missile ships, creating a dense wall of fire thousands of meters high in the darkness. Boost explosion sounds echoed continuously. Over 85% of enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into fireballs, falling into the sea like prolonged red-black meteor rain. The remaining ones rushed in. 12 hit the forward Vietnamese missile ship cluster. Fire flared up violently in the engine room. 5 ships tilted heavily. Water rushed into compartments like a black waterfall in the night. 8 others were intercepted close aboard by Vietnamese frigates. Water columns rose over 120 meters high. Only 6 slipped through the net, striking 3 small patrol boats. Hulls exploded from the middle, broke in 2, sank completely in less than a minute. Amidst prolonged, horrifying metal screeching sound, counterattack exploded like a night storm. The remaining Vietnamese missile ships simultaneously fired over 400 anti-ship missiles in the biggest wave since the battle started. They flew at 4 altitude layers, dividing into 8 spearheads charging straight into the dense enemy formation of over 100 ships. The first hit the enemy lead command frigate. The hull was completely ripped apart, fire spread from the command room down to the main magazine. Secondary explosion turned the ship into a fireball over 250 meters high in the midnight sea. At the same time, from the east, the U.S. aircraft carrier group suddenly closed in to only 100 nautical miles. Over 50 fighter jets took off continuously from the flight deck, rushing low near water surface with infrared lights scanning continuously. They dropped precision-guided bombs onto the enemy landing ship, Cluster, trying to protect the entrance to the underground base. Each bomb exploded, creating a white water column with thick black smoke. Over 30 landing ships were hit in succession. 20 broke in two, sinking immediately. The remaining 10 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall. Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly began to roar. Thousands of large-caliber shells drew bright red parabolic lines on the black sky background, falling like rain of fire from the south. More than 20 more enemy frigates were hit heavily. Hulls exploded, tilted completely, flooded, and sank gradually in prolonged, horrifying metal screeching in the night. Within less than 12 minutes, over 60 enemy ships were burning or sunken, oil slick forming giant black streaks stretching tens of nautical miles in the dark East Sea. In the middle of the late night East Sea, the sea surface had turned into a hell of fire, with over 80 large and small fires flickering amidst the thick darkness. Pitch-black oil slicks stretched for tens of nautical miles, reflecting missile firelight like a boiling sea of blood under the starless sky. Suddenly, the remaining enemy formation of over 90 ships tried to group into a final spearhead. They simultaneously launched over 500 anti-ship and cruise missiles in one wave. Fire trails flew overlapping densely, like a swarm of fire locusts in the night, aiming straight at the Vietnamese missile ship formation, and U.S. carrier group just closed in to only 70 nautical miles. The Alliance air defense net rose up like a giant steel wall. Over 700 interceptor missiles from U.S. destroyers, Vietnamese missile ships, and Spratly coastal defense systems left launchers in a single rhythm, creating a wall of fire thousands of meters high, glowing bright in the late night. Boost explosion sounds echoed like continuous thunder. Over 95% of enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into thousands of fireballs, falling into the sea like prolonged red-black meteor rain. The remaining ones rushed in. 15 hit the forward Vietnamese missile ship Cluster. Fire flared up violently in many compartments. 6 ships tilted heavily. Water rushed into compartments like a black waterfall in the night. 10 others were intercepted close aboard by U.S. destroyers. Water columns rose over 150 meters high. Only 8 slipped through the net, striking 4 Vietnamese frigates. Hulls exploded from the middle, broke in 2, sank completely in less than a minute, amidst prolonged, horrifying metal screeching sound. Counterattack exploded like a storm at the end of the night. Vietnamese missile ships and U.S. destroyers simultaneously launched over 600 anti-ship missiles in the single largest wave of the entire battle. They flew at 5 altitude layers, dividing into 10 spearheads, charging straight into the enemy formation like a fire net with no escape. The first hit the remaining enemy command ship. The hull was completely ripped apart. Fire spread from the command room down to the main magazine. Secondary explosion turned the ship into a fireball over 300 meters high in the midnight sea. At the same time, over 80 U.S. and Vietnamese fighter jets dived down from all directions like a swarm of night moths. They dropped infrared-guided bombs and precision rockets onto the final landing ships, trying to protect the underground base. Each explosion created a white water column with thick black smoke. Over 40 landing ships were hit in succession, 30 broke in two, sinking immediately. The remaining 10 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall. Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly fired the final night wave. Over 5,000 large-caliber shells fell like a hellish rain of fire from the south, turning the entire remaining enemy formation into a pile of burnt black scrap metal in the East Sea. More than 30 more frigates were hit heavily, hulls exploded, tilted completely, flooded and sank gradually in prolonged, horrifying metal screeching in the pitch-black night. Within the last less than 10 minutes, over 100 enemy ships had been completely wiped out from the sea around the underground base. Late night, East Sea now only had secondary explosion sounds, echoing from over 100 large and small fires on the pitch-black sea surface. Oil slick forming giant black streaks stretching tens of nautical miles, reflecting missile firelight like a coagulated sea of blood in the murky, dark ocean. Suddenly, the remaining enemy formation of over 60 ships tried to group into a final attack spearhead. They simultaneously launched over 600 anti-ship and cruise missiles in one desperate wave. Fire trails flew overlapping densely like a swarm of fire locusts in the night, aiming straight at the U.S. aircraft carrier, just closed in to only 50 nautical miles, and the Vietnamese missile ship formation tightening the siege around the underground base. The Alliance air defense net rose up like an impregnable steel wall. Over 1,000 interceptor missiles from U.S. destroyers, Vietnamese missile ships, and Spratly coastal defense systems left launchers in a single rhythm, creating a wall of fire thousands of meters high, glowing bright in the late night. Boost explosion sounds echoed like continuous thunder. Over 98% of enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into thousands of fireballs falling into the sea like prolonged red-black meteor rain. The remaining ones rushed in. 10 hit the forward U.S. destroyer cluster. Fire flared up violently on the upper deck, but automatic fire suppression systems controlled it in time. 7 others were intercepted close aboard by Vietnamese missile ships. Water columns rose over 200 meters high. Only 5 slipped through the net, striking 3 Vietnamese frigates. Hulls exploded from the middle, broke into, sank completely in less than a minute. Amidst prolonged, horrifying metal screeching sound, counterattack exploded like the final storm of the night. Vietnamese missile ships and U.S. destroyers simultaneously launched over 800 anti-ship missiles in the single largest wave of the entire battle. They flew at 6 altitude layers, dividing into 12 spearheads, charging straight into the enemy formation like a fire net with no escape. The first hit the final enemy command ship. The hull was completely ripped apart. Fire spread from the command room down to the main magazine. Secondary explosion turned the ship into a fireball over 350 meters high in the midnight sea. At the same time, over 100 US and Vietnamese fighter jets dived down from all directions like the final swarm of night moths. They dropped infrared-guided bombs, rockets, and light torpedoes precisely onto the remaining ships trying to flee north. Each explosion created a white water column with thick black smoke. All 60 enemy ships were hit in succession. 40 broke in too, sinking immediately. The remaining 20 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall amidst prolonged, horrifying metal screeching. Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly fired the final night wave. Over 6,000 large-caliber shells fell like a hellish rain of fire from the south, turning the entire remaining enemy formation into a pile of burnt black scrap metal in the East Sea. Not a single one remained afloat. Not a single signal blinked on radar anymore. Within the last less than 8 minutes, every trace of over 120 enemy ships had been completely wiped out from the sea around the underground base. Dawn just broke in the east of the East Sea. First sunlight pierced through the thick black smoke remaining from the night, dyeing the sea area full of burning oil and shipwrecks red. Over 110 large and small fires still smoldered on the water. Smoke columns, thousands of meters high, swirled like giant black pillars connecting sea and sky. Suddenly, Alliance radar sounded the final level alarm again. From the far north, over 20 remaining enemy warships tried to assemble for the last time, rushing full speed towards the underground base area with desperate retaliation intent. They simultaneously launched over 400 cruise missiles, flying low in the dim dawn light. The Alliance air defense net awoke completely. Over 1,200 interceptor missiles from U.S. destroyers, Vietnamese missile ships, and Spratly coastal defense systems left launchers at the same time, illuminating the entire sea area like a second Sunday. Boost explosion sounds echoed continuously. Almost all enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into thousands of fireballs, falling into the sea like hellish fireworks in the early morning. Only a few slipped through the net, rushing in. 4 hit the outer U.S. destroyer. Fire flared up violently on the starboard side, but the fire team controlled it in time. 3 others struck the Vietnamese missile ship, causing fire in the aft compartment, but the ship still kept speed firing back. Not a single one reached the aircraft carrier. Counterattack exploded in the dawn light. All Vietnamese missile ships and U.S. destroyers simultaneously launched over 1,000 anti-ship missiles. Daylight guided. They flew close to the water surface, dividing into 15 spearheads, charging straight into the remaining enemy cluster, like the final ghostly fire net. The first hit the lead ship. Hull exploded from the middle. Fire spread fast, turning the ship into a giant torch in the bright sea. At the same time, over 150 U.S. and Vietnamese fighter jets, flying in light, dived down from above. They dropped guided bombs and precision rockets onto the remaining ships trying to flee in the early sunlight. Each explosion created a white fire column with thick black smoke. All 20 enemy ships were hit in succession. 15 broke in two, sinking immediately. Amidst horrifying metal screeching sound, the remaining 5 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall. Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly fired the final volley. Over 8,000 large-caliber shells were fired with strongest firepower, falling like fire meteors from the south, turning the entire final enemy ship cluster into a pile of red-burning scrap metal in the early morning East Sea. Not a single one remained afloat. Within less than 10 minutes of dawn, every final threat had been wiped out completely. Red dawn light gradually spread over the East Sea, but the sea area around the underground base was still immersed in thick black smoke, and hundreds of large and small fires not yet extinguished. Pitch black oil slick stretched for tens of nautical miles. Water surface boiled under bright orange fire columns flickering in the early morning. Suddenly, from deep under the seabed, a series of underground tunnel doors of the artificial base burst open. Over 30 enemy warships still hiding inside suddenly surfaced at the same time, simultaneously launching over 400 anti-ship and cruise missiles in the final ambush wave. Dense fire trails flew overlapping from below upwards, aiming straight at the Vietnamese missile ship formation and U.S. aircraft carrier holding the siege above. The Alliance air defense net reacted instantly. Over 1,500 interceptor missiles from U.S. destroyers, Vietnamese missile ships, and Spratly coastal defense systems left launchers in one rhythm, creating a giant wall of fire glowing bright in the dawn. Boost explosion sounds echoed continuously. Almost all enemy missiles were shot down midway, exploding into thousands of fireballs falling into the sea like early morning hellish fireworks. Only a few slipped through the net, rushing in. 6 hit the forward U.S. destroyer. Fire flared up violently on the upper deck, but the automatic fire suppression system controlled it in time. 4 others struck the Vietnamese missile ship, causing fire in the aft compartment, but the ship still kept speed firing back. Not a single one reached the aircraft carrier. Counterattack exploded like a morning storm. All Vietnamese missile ships and U.S. destroyers simultaneously launched over 1,200 anti-ship missiles, daylight guided. They flew close to the water surface, dividing into 20 spearheads, charging straight into the enemy ship cluster, just surfaced from the underground base like a fire net with no escape. The first hit the lead ship. Hull exploded from the middle. Fire spread fast, turning the ship into a giant torch in the bright sea. At the same time, over 200 U.S. and Vietnamese fighter jets dived down from above. They dropped guided bombs and precision rockets onto the remaining ships just escaped from the underground tunnel. Each explosion created a white fire column with thick black smoke All 30 enemy ships were hit in succession. 20 broke in, 2 sinking immediately. Amidst horrifying metal screeching sound, the remaining 10 burned fiercely, then tilted completely. Water rushed into compartments like a waterfall. Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly fired the final bright volley. Over 10,000 large-caliber shells were fired with strongest firepower, falling like fire meteors from the south, turning the entire final enemy ship cluster and the underground base itself into a pile of red burning scrap metal in the East Sea. Artificial structure under the seabed began to collapse. Water columns sprayed hundreds of meters high, accompanied by secondary explosion, sounds echoing at the bottom. Within less than 10 minutes of dawn, every final threat from the underground base had been wiped out completely. Mid-morning, the sun had risen high, but the sea area around the underground base was still darkened by black smoke from over 120 large and small fires. The artificial structure at the bottom was now just a pile of rubble, air bubbles, and oil slick rising to the water surface, like a giant wound of the ocean. At the command decks of U.S. aircraft carriers and Vietnamese missile ships, the final pursuit order was issued simultaneously. Over 150 anti-submarine helicopters and low-flying fighter jets took off from flight decks, rushing close to the water surface with searchlights scanning continuously. They dropped blinding white flares onto water areas suspected of having enemy speedboats still trying to hide and run. The last boats were detected immediately. Rocket volleys from Vietnamese anti-submarine helicopters and U.S. fighter jets fired down like rain, each exploding, creating a white water column with orange fire. Over 50 speedboats were wiped out in just a few minutes. Bodies and debris floated densely amidst the oil slick. At the same time, beneath the water surface, U.S. anti-submarine helicopter crew dropped sonar and light torpedoes down to a depth of 200 meters. 4 remaining enemy submarines were detected while trying to sneak away from the ruined area. 8 torpedoes chased after. Dull explosion sounds under the seabed rang out continuously. Water columns sprayed over 100 meters high. 4 submarines surfaced in a broken-in-half state, then sank forever with a giant column of black oil. On the sea surface, Vietnamese frigates began deploying rescue speedboats only for Allied patrol forces. Not a single person from the opposing side was pulled up. The sea had taken them all. Meanwhile, Vietnamese coastal artillery from Spratly fired the final illumination volley. Hundreds of shells exploded high above, turning the entire sea area into daytime for a few minutes. Not a single strange target blinked on radar anymore. The tension lasting all night gradually dissipated. Only the sound of waves lapping gently against ship sides and steady patrol engine sound remained. Harsh noon sun, the East Sea around the underground base area, was now completely peaceful, under absolute control of the Vietnam-US alliance. Over 100 warships still held tight formation, but cannons had lowered barrels, radar only scanned in standby mode. Wrecks of over 120 enemy ships had sunk deep or drifted far offshore. Oil slick gradually dissolved with the sea breeze. Dolphins began appearing again at the edge of the old war zone. Sound of waves lapping regularly, as if the night of fire hell never happened. From Cam Ranh to Washington, official announcement was broadcast. Underground base has been completely destroyed. East Sea is safe. Late afternoon, the red sun slowly set in the west, dyeing gently red on the sea surface now clear of smoke and fire. Allied warship formation began rotating patrol, searchlights turning off gradually, only the last smoke columns remaining fading into the wind.
Command,
At the Vietnam
contact.
Naval
Grid
Command,
reference, Yankee.
staff officers left the radar screens for the first time. Electronic map turned off all red dots. Heavy silence atmosphere of victory covered the war room. At sea, Vietnamese missile ships and U.S. aircraft carriers turned on loudspeakers, broadcasting peace signals. Sound of gentle waves lapping like the ocean, sighing in relief. New day dawn broke. First sunlight shone down on the sea area that was once the underground base, now just a pile of rubble at the bottom. Vietnam, U.S. alliance completely controlled the area, warship formation forming a permanent protective circle around Spratly Archipelago. No more explosions, no more missile fire trails. Only the sound of waves and sea breeze whispering the story of a night that changed everything. Operation ended.